So there's a term for this, right? When you sign up for something, when you set out to do something, when you enroll in a position, there's a finite amount of work or obligation or intention associated with that, right? You're saying, I'm going to do this. And then what happens is you end up with that, right? Things kind of snowball. You end up checking out of Target and you're like apologizing. You're saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't plan for this, I just came in for toothpaste. Can you push my extra cart? Right? That's part of a conversation that I've seen people have. There's a term for this, they call it scope creep. Clap if you're familiar with scope creep. I feel like it plagues the entrepreneurs more than anyone else in the world. You set out with these noble intentions. You plan to do something, to do whatever it is that you're great at. And you set out and you say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just be great at this. And then somewhere along the way, things happen and you blink and then you say, why am I doing these other 9 things? Where did these come from? How did they end up on my plate? Does that sound familiar? You end up with all of these things that you're not sure are the best use of your time, but somehow they've crept into the scope of whatever your responsibility is. This exists not only on a project-by-project basis, but also in roles, right? In the role you may have been hired to do, the job description, the company you set out to run. Krista mentioned that I used to live and work in the draft beer industry. What I did was I did draft beer system cleaning, installation, and maintenance. So any craft beer or draft beer enthusiasts, give me some applause. Clap. Yeah, sure. There's for the past 15 years, or maybe even longer, arguably, there has been this explosion in the craft beer world where people are really focused on craft beer. Craft breweries, microbreweries, creating intense and flavorful and diverse lagers and ales and meads, right? And gruits and all these other variations of beer, right? So they're doing all of these really cool things. So what I did was when I graduated college, I'm 21 years old. At that point, I was 21 years old, and I had a friend reach out to me and say, hey, Greg, I'm starting this company. I've been going for 3 months. I'm just starting to get momentum. I've got a really cool opportunity, though, that I want to take. So I'd like to hire you to run my company. So 21-year-old Greg said, great. You want me to run a company in the draft beer world? Where do I sign? No brainer, right? He said, I can't pay you a whole lot, but I can make you a part owner. And I thought part owner meant I would be on a beach somewhere making phone calls, right? I didn't realize part owner meant I would be doing all of the things that he wasn't doing, because now he was handing me the keys to the company. Okay, so here's what I felt. I believe that beer is a brewer's art, right? If a brewer, an individual, a guy or a gal, has taken the time to select the grains they want to use. There's only 4 ingredients in beer, right? It's grain, hops, water, and yeast. Those are the only 4 ingredients in beer. They've taken the time to hand select, right, what grains they want to use, primarily barley, but maybe some specialty grains as well. And then they've said, you know what, we're going to use water that has been triple distilled or has been distilled through osmosis or these other scientific terms. They've really carefully selected and created the water they want to use. And then they say, you know what, I'm going to choose only these hops. Only hops grown in Wisconsin, only hops grown in Washington. I'm only going to choose these Cascade or these Nugget hops or these, there's dozens and dozens of varieties of hops, right? They're really intense, and they've selected very specific hops they want to use. And then lastly, they say, I'm going to choose this particular yeast for the fermentation process. And there are genuinely thousands of strands of yeast, right? Many of them naturally occurring. So that brewer has selected these things and not only carefully selected those ingredients, but selected the order in which they choose to use them. Did you know that when you're brewing beer, if you introduce hops at the beginning of the brewing process, it makes the beer really bitter? But if you introduce them at the end of the brewing process, it makes it really aromatic. So you get a lot of those notes, those flavorful notes that you smell when you drink beer. Right? So they're not only choosing what they put into it, they're choosing how. That's how much effort and intensity goes into creating this beer. These brewers literally and figuratively pour themselves into their craft. And then if you take that beer and you take it to a restaurant and you hook it up to a draft beer system that hasn't been cleaned or maintained properly, and it pours a beer that doesn't taste the way the brewer intended it to, and somebody drinks that beer, they're going to say that brewer doesn't know what he or she is doing. They're not going to say that draft beer system stinks, that it wasn't clean, it was skunky, it was overpressurized or undercarbonated. They're not going to realize that. They're going to blame the brewer. So in taking this job and building this company, what I genuinely believed, what I felt, was that I was protecting the integrity of that brewer's art. I was cleaning draft beer systems. I realize that now. But that's how I felt. That passionate about a small thing like that, right? Now, what I would like to do, what I wanted to do was install draft beer systems. I wanted to do it right. I wanted to do it properly. For every single bar or restaurant that dispenses draft beer, I want that beer to taste exactly how the brewer intended. But what I found was that I needed to do some sales. I needed to get new accounts, right? I needed to get out there and talk to people. I needed to knock on doors. I needed to explain why my service was different from other people. A lot of people could get draft beer systems installed for free, because a lot of the distributors would do it on the sly, say, hey, I'll install your draft beer system, but you have to keep 5 of my beers on. Things like that were happening, and I had to decide, I had to really prove that I was a crusader, what I felt like, for the noble cause of proper draft beer. And then I grew the business to a point where we had to hire more hands. I needed people to help. These installation projects had snowballed beyond what I was capable of delivering. So I had to hire new people, right? And then beyond that, I had accounts payable. I had bills that I was accountable for. I had insurance, of course. I had the van that I worked out of. I had chemicals I needed. I had gas that I needed for the van as well. I had all these things that I had to now take care of. And then sooner or later, the people that I hired wanted to be paid, so I had to figure out a payroll system. I had to cut them checks. I did, by hand, cut them checks for a while. Then I found a solution to issue those paychecks on a regular basis, right? And then finally, I don't know if you guys know this, but bars and restaurants, a lot of them are chains. And a lot of those chain bars and restaurants aren't allowed to issue checks on the spot. They have to go through a central or regional office. And they only write checks once a month. So I would deliver a bill, deliver a service, and then a month later, they might mail me a check. Or depending on how I got it in, it could be as long as a month and a half, right? So what I had to do was follow up with these people. They may not have cash on hand. If I was there before they opened, they might have the register open. It may be a bartender opening and the owner's not even there. What I found was these people, these businesses that were my clients, they wanted to pay me, but sometimes it wasn't realistic. They weren't in a position where they could do that. So now I had to keep track of who owed me money. And I had to reach out to those people. I had to remind them. And that wasn't what I was good at. That wasn't what I was great at. It wasn't my native genius, and it wasn't what I set out to do. But all of these things had crept into the scope of what I actually wanted to be doing. And this, what I found, when I blinked, I said, wow, installing draft beer systems is less than half my time. Less than half. But that's what I was passionate about. That's what I was natively good at, right? What I'm asking is, this is happening all over the place. What has crept into your scope? What has popped up on your plate that takes up your time, either on a weekly basis, a daily basis, or a monthly basis? What has worked its way into your schedule that doesn't belong there? Right? Ask yourself, what is it that I do? Think about, well, from 8 to 8:30, I check email. That's fine. From 8:30 to 10:30, I respond to these customer inquiries. Hold on. Right? Is that part of your job? Is that on your job description? What does your business card say? And is that what you're actually doing? Maybe it's fulfillment, sales, hiring, firing, copywriting. Maybe it's building campaigns. Maybe Infusionsoft is the thing that has crept into your scope that's preventing you from being awesome at whatever you're awesome at. That's possible, okay? Customer follow-up. We preach about how important it is to get in touch with people, to follow up with them. Of course that's important. But is it the best use of your time? Is that what you're best at? Creating content. This is consistently the biggest hurdle for small businesses. I was an absolute expert in draft beer systems. I knew exactly what PSI of CO2 I had to apply to the keg to make it move 30 feet at the appropriate flow rate of 2 ounces per second with 1/2-inch polyurethane tubing. Right? I knew that. Now, if it went upstairs, you had to change. You could only apply 70% CO2. You had to use a blended gas, so it was 30% nitrogen, because CO2 is soluble in beer, and if you put too much pressure on it, it'll be reabsorbed and it'll pour out foam. You guys all know that already, right? I knew these things, but you get so close to your subject matter that you forget what you know is unique and what you know is valuable. And the things that you are an expert in, that's something that people want. And so when it came to creating content, I was like, well, we do draft beer systems. You know the rest. You know what that means. But I forgot to explain that the way that we do draft beer systems is different, and here is why.